So hey everyone, I'm Chela Rodriguez from Act for Goa, and I'm here today on Ultramonix platform with Tahir Noronha, where we will speak to the
Hi.
recent amendments made to Goa's land and building regulations. So to first give you a bit of background on Tahir, he's an urban and regional planner by profession and is somebody who has always been interested in public participation and environmental protection. He's based out of both Goa and the US. In the US right now, where he is pursuing his master's degree in urban and regional planning at the University of Michigan. And over the last month, he was present in Goa and worked with organizations such as GBA, Act for Goa, Goa Foundation, to look at these recent amendments to Goa's planning laws and how they could impact Goa's natural environment. So now coming to the recent amendments, there were 11 amendments introduced to the Goa Land and Building Construction Regulations last month on the 27th of April, which have been deemed to be rather controversial, amongst civil societies and the public at large, honestly. Well, planning in Goa has intentionally protected national cover zones from destructive development, and they remain untouched, forming essential habitats to wildlife and biodiversity. But now these new amendments created sort of allow for construction in these areas and for the fragmentation of Goa's fragile ecosystems. Now, upon studying, it was found out that through these rather minor additions, and eliminations of words, at various places, these amendments could cause sweeping changes to Goa's landscapes and not in a good way. They threaten Goa's khazans, fields, orchards, and any other agricultural land at large. They target eco-sensitive zones for development, which, mind you, have been prompted by individual persons with vested interests without any official request. They permit massive constructions that would allow for Goa to ultimately turn into a possible concrete jungle as opposed to the green state it currently is. So anyway, you see that all of these new amendments have bring along with them a large number of problems, and we'll get more into the details about it along the session. But to start off with, Tahir, can you tell us what the Goa land development building construction regulations exactly are? Essentially, what purpose do they serve? And when were they first introduced and why?
Okay, that's actually a very interesting question because it uh, goes back to basically the concepts of planning in Goa. The first plan Goa had, which was in fact one of the first regional plans in India, was done in 1986, called Regional Plan for Goa 2001. That plan, like most plans, had had within it a let me just open let me put up a few slides to just share some so basically, when you want to make a plan, first the government has to declare a planning area, uh, and prepare a land use register which shows what exists on ground. The role of the public in a land use register is to tell the government that, oh, your surveys of what's existing on the ground is wrong right now. Then they work out an interim plan which locks existing structures down, so that there can be no more illegal construction. And soon after, they're supposed to do a comprehensive plan. Any comprehensive plan, and what I'm putting up on the screen over here is the Delhi Master Plan, which is a standard comprehensive plan, does three things. It identifies projects, it puts into place a map with zones, colored zones, that and then it has development control regulations for each zone, which tells you what you can do in those zones, to what height, to what width, and what types of structures are allowed in these zones. Goa had a regional plan in 2001, till 2001, which was developed in 1986 which did this basic exercise of identifying a few important projects, zoning for the whole state, and developing DCR. In 1999, before the regional plan of 2001 was to reach its expiry, the government of Goa decided that we will make a new regional plan. And this time we'll not keep it for 15 or 20 years. Let's keep it for only 10 years, coming in force from 2001, ending at 2011. That regional plan they gave to a private consultant from Delhi, and it evoked a huge amount of protest from people across Goa. So after the government fell, and many of you all will remember the GPA agitations that happened at that time, the government fell, and they created a new regional plan called Regional Plan for Goa 2021. One of the biggest allegations against Regional Plan for Goa 2011 was that it painted a lot of Goa as just open for development with barely any development control regulations. It was a free-for-all plan. So the draft regional plan for Goa came out in 2007. That draft regional plan had development control regulations inside the plan. Then the government took two policy decisions and enforced them through amending the planning law, the Goa Town Planning Act. They said 7 municipalities in Goa will be taken out of the regional plan. It was the first time in the history of India that municipalities were taken out of a regional plan, because planning in India has to be this 3-tiered system with a regional plan and then detailed out through comprehensive development plans for cities and detailed out further as through ward level local area plans. This was the first case in India, and I think till now it's the only case where cities don't have to conform to a regional plan. The second important amendment that they did at that time was that they decided that let's take the DCR out of the regional plan and let's make a separate law called the Goa Regulation of Land and Building Construction and put the DCR in there along with building codes, which are very different. The building codes, the DCR come from planning perspective. They tell you what is the carrying capacity of the land. How wide is the road? If the road is this wide, you can build this much. They tell you that if your zoning is for settlement, you can build to this height and this FAR. Building codes tell you about the structural stability of a building. It tells you about the ventilation. It tells you when two buildings can share a common wall and when they can't. They're very, very different things. And in all other states of India at that time, they were two different laws. We put them all into one from a request coming from architects and builders who wanted a single window system for clearance. But over the years, it's become more and more sinister, because what we saw first in September of 2022 and now, the government goes to amend the building regulations, and the rhetoric is always we are amending the building code. They don't say that they're tweaking anything to do with planning. They say we are amending the building code. And building codes across the world are amended very regularly because building details are dependent on science, and they do change. As science evolves, we learn new things. So it's perfectly fair. And that's also why public don't really take much care when a building amendment comes in. What we have seen in the last two is that these building amendments are actually planning amendments, because they tweak the DCR that was taken out of the regional plan and put into these regulations.
That's interesting. And just for our viewers, can you've used the abbreviation DCR multiple times. Could you tell us a bit about what exactly it is?
So the DCR are what we as planners call development control regulations. They consist of 4 things. They consist, wait, let me see. I think I have an image for that. Just give me a second. Okay, I'll find it and I'll show you. I mean by this. Yeah.
Just while Tahir is looking for this, as he mentioned in the chat, we are open to questions, of course. So anything that you might want to know, and that may be in contextual to everything Tahir will tell us in this session, please do go ahead and post in the chat. We have an answer to it.
Yeah. So these are what DCR do. They set up what's called FAR. FAR is very important to planners and to anybody who wants to build anything anywhere. It tells you how if your plot is, let's say, 100 square meters and your FAR is 20 is a 0.5 FAR or a 50% FAR. It tells you that the total built up area in your plot can take up 50 can be 50% of your total plot area. The other important thing that it does is called coverage. Coverage says how much of your plot can be covered by built structures. So the shape and form of your buildings always have to conform to FAR and coverage. Besides these two, there are height restrictions, which say maybe, for example, in Panjim, they've taken a decision that except building so then even if you have a high enough FAR and a large enough and coverage is small, so you still may have to further cap your development by the height restriction. And the last thing is setbacks. Setbacks are a DCR because, again, we need to talk about road carrying capacities. How many vehicles can a road accommodate? Finally, DCR also have a few relaxations here and there. This is conflicted with the building bylaws, as we call building amendments, which are very, very much concerning widths of staircases, materials of walls, structural stability, slope of roof.
That's very interesting. The chart is super helpful. I think we should make sure to share that later on with people because it's vital information. So going forward, coming to the amendments, actually, I want to ask, what is the process involved in making these amendments? And do we have the right kind of people proposing these very amendments?
To make amendments. Now, by law, the government should put in one MLA, the Minister for Planning, the heads of all concerned departments who are and any number of technical experts, to the point that the technical experts cannot outnumber the government, the heads of departments. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are 6 departments that the Goa government feels are concerned with planning: PWD, agriculture, water resources, town planning, and urban development. And it's not coming to me, but it's these heads of department. The one MLA on the steering committee was, interestingly, our chief minister, and the minister for planning was the other political appointee. This steering committee seems to have only one technical member on it. So the logic behind the law is that the heads of the bureaucrats at the head of the department know what they're doing, and they will put forward the technical arguments. The politicians put forward the will of the people, and the committee is structured in such a way that the politicians are always in a minority. However, in this case, what we have is that if you go and see, most of the amendments have actually come from either the politicians or somebody, an unknown person, has informed the steering committee that these amendments are needed. Now, there are a couple of amendments that the town planning department within the steering committee have themselves asked for, like adding charging points for electric vehicles. But there are others which have just come as the committee was informed, the committee was appraised.
Right, that's very interesting. So the experts would probably want to come up with the kind of toolkits that you're doing. It leaves everybody in the dark and unclear.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing that happens after the steering committee is now that after comments are received to the amendment. So one of the nice things that we have in Goa is that because of the planning connotations to the building code, these amendments are open to public objections and suggestions. I mean, there are many acts in Goa where amendments are not open to objections and suggestions from the general public. Because of the planning connotations, the government has to keep these open for 30 days. And 30 days ends this Friday on the 2nd of June. Now, to study those, the government has to constitute a subcommittee. The subcommittee can have more private representatives than government representatives. In fact, normally the subcommittee will just have a town planner as the member secretary of that committee and the minister as the chairman of that committee. But then it'll have around 4 to 5 subject experts who are private individuals normally. They'll probably invite the Institute of Architects, the Institute of Engineers to nominate one of their own members as people on the subcommittee, because the subcommittee has to read everybody's objections and finally give a report on what they are.
Right. That's very insightful knowing the process going into it. Well, now getting more into the details of these 11 controversial amendments. Well, can you tell us what these amendments exactly entail, what they mean essentially, and the kind of repercussions they could have on our state if at all they are passed? And do you think they are justified?
Okay, so I think that some of the amendments, all of the amendments have little problems in them, but maybe 4 of them are really, really problematic. So, for example, there is one amendment which allows housing to 7.5% inside the industrial zones. To me, the biggest problem with that is that in Goa, we have this concept called spot industries. If there was an industry before regional plan, it was spot marked out for just that property. And that's the bulk of industries in Goa. Most industries in Goa are not in the industrial estates. Now, permitting housing in those industrial zones is basically permitting housing in a plot which never had housing. And permitting housing in an industrial estate like Verna is very different. But that being said, I feel like it would be far easier for them to update a plan and carve out settlement zones from the existing industrial estates if they really felt that that was a need. Because you can always have concerns of public health coming from allowing people to live in industrial areas. But so it has problems, but it's not major. The major mess that I think is one, when they decided that right now we've got 2 types of eco-sensitive zones. Those eco-sensitive zones are our orchard lands, which are our slopey lands which have natural vegetation or planted vegetation, and our paddy lands, which are generally our khazans. Now, someone explained to a committee that our current regulations are too restrictive and that other states have other uses which are permitted in the agricultural zones. So now you can do something called a sports facility. We all know in Goa, we have a huge aversion to ideas like golf courses. But now when something's called a sports facility, who's to say that a golf course is not going to come in? You can do food processing, which would basically be a large industrial use in the agricultural land. So it basically goes to erase the principle by which Goa decided that nothing should be allowed to be constructed in the agricultural land. You see, as compared to other states of India, Goa has far, far less agricultural land in percentage to settlement land. And Goa is far more at risk of climate change related disasters. We already see flooding and landslides every year. We've seen this year in the heat wave also how forest fires spread. And part of all of this is the fragmenting of our agriculture, of our eco-sensitive zones, which in Goa end up being forest, which is minimal, and agricultural lands. The Mole protest is about trying to prevent fragmentation of the little forest that we have. So when I'm talking about, the task force for Regional Plan 2021 said, let the agricultural lands are the only green lands we have, cultivated or not cultivated. They are playing this climate resilience role. So we need to restrict development inside them. Similarly, the other clause that is very problematic is allowing constructions of farmhouses of 1,000 square meters. 1,000 square meters, 10,000 square feet is an absurd area, an absurdly huge area. It's the old secretariat in Panjim, Adil Shah's palace, a gigantic palatial building, is 1,200 square meters. So you can just think about the area. This is bigger than most palatial Goan homes. Yeah, these are farmhouses justified that the poor farmer needs to have a place to live on the field. We're not against allowing small, reasonable farmhouses, but to open up to 1,000 square meters, and the only restriction on farmhouses is that the owner has to own agricultural land and they have to be 7.5 meters tall, which means a ground floor structure. Maybe you can have a mezzanine. Is not enough to protect or stop someone from building several row houses in a single foundation and calling it as a farmhouse. Nobody is going to go and inspect and say this is not a farmhouse. The other problem is that now earlier farmhouses were only allowed in the orchard lands. Now farmhouses are allowed in khazans and paddy lands as well. And the only condition to stop people from building farmhouses on the low-lying lands is that the lands must not be low-lying during the time of site inspection. So a town planner has to go to the property and look and see, is the land low-lying? Because the state doesn't have any elevation data of its own. And this is very problematic because one of the big concerns in Goa is illegal filling up of our fields. And our khazan fields are the sponge that protects Goa from catastrophic floods. We have to keep remembering this. Most of Goa is below sea level already. A 1 foot sea level rise will put Panjim underwater, 40% of Panjim underwater immediately. A 1 foot sea level rise is assumed by 2030. So we need to be very, very careful to keep these khazan lands open so that they soak up water and protect our built areas, protect the private property that we want and we need to invest in. The other big problem is they've reduced the minimum road widths. And this seems to be completely unscientifically done. They've now decided that any road that's wider than 6 meters, and what we mean by a road that's wider than 6 meters is once you take away the portions for gutters and pavements, you've got 4.5 meters wide, which is one car and one bike. You can't even have two cars crossing each other at the same time in a 4.5 meter road. If one tempo goes, it's blocked. They've decided that any of these roads can now allow constructions of up to 180 housing units. So large housing developments can come up along these really narrow roads with nobody thinking of what happens at 8:30 in the morning when all the children have to go to school. Or what happens at 9:30 when certain people are going to work and other people are coming back after having dropped their kids to school. The amount of traffic congestion and problems that we're going to have with this reduction of road widths, and it really just seems like they've not their mind. Quite concerning and sad. And finally, to me, what I think is the most problematic one is the regularization of illegal constructions. In fact, in 2021, there was a law introduced in the assembly besides these amendments, a separate law called the Goa Regularization of Construction Act, which made all illegal constructions less than 500 square meters after following a certain, so if you had an illegal construction, you could apply to the collector, and there's a whole process by which there is a chance you can legalize your construction. Now, what this amendment does is it says above and beyond the small structures for the small people, there are many small people who own construction which is larger than 500 square meters, and we need to regularize those as well. So there's no upper limit now. Basically, what it means is that nothing is safe. The old Goa illegal construction, which is around 700 square meters built up, could now get legalized. Who's to say that the Supreme Court case is not thrown out and they file for legalization under this clause? All of these buildings that have been built in violation of so many other rules and regulations can now get opened up. And these are not buildings of poor Goans. No poor Goan has a structure over 500 square meters.
That's true. So clearly, these amendments are not justified, and if anything, they are absolutely counterproductive. So thank you for shedding light on that. Now, building up on these atrocities, there are allegations that these amendments open the door for anyone to change the zoning of an environmentally protected plot to a plot where construction can actually be taking place. So can you explain how this actually happens, possibly with an example in the form of a case study? Do try and do something.
Yeah, sorry, I got muted for some reason. Yep, just give me again like half a minute. But one of the things that happened alongside the building amendments, which kind of slipped under the radar, was an amendment to the Goa Town and Country Planning Act as well. And this amendment now allows Chief Town Planner of Goa to make changes to the plans, to the regional plan, if the Chief Town Planner feels that there is an inadvertent error committed by the people by the task force when they made the regional plan. Now, the regional plan for Goa has a lot of controversies. There are many restrictions on private property, on poor people, which we have to be conscious of. However, I feel personally that the eco-sensitive zone marking and the containment of the settlement area to certain what they call settlement ribbons are two of the big successes of the regional plan. But whenever there's a rule, someone wants to circumvent the rule. And who wants to circumvent the rule? This is Sandesh Prabhudesai's book, and I love this table because he's found 18 cases in the book where ministers or their spouses have directly applied for zone changes under what was section 16B, which allowed people to tweak the regional plan for public interest. And look at the size of the areas they've asked for: 393 square meters for Sudhin Davlikar's brother. They're giant plot changes that they're trying to change. And these are, so the truth is that most of the politicians in our assembly are actually in the real estate building. I'd say over 35 out of 40. And there is a vested interest by the people who make the laws themselves, which is why they do these amendments. Because in a plan, if you want to change the zoning, the planning process demands that you show studies and you make a case. That's part of what I do in the US also, is most of our job as a planner is we do research. Because if there is a change of a zone, we have to make a very compelling argument why the change of the zone is in the public interest. So to avoid the research needed for public interest, they have said there are errors in the regional plan. We think that there are huge problems with this amendment to law because it removes the principle of public comment. The chief planner can unilaterally make decisions, and it's likely in the violation of the 73rd constitutional amendment. It's piecemeal, case by case, and in Goa we have a statement: case by case equals commission by commission, because you need to apply as a builder that my land has been incorrectly zoned. And it asks for a technical report from an architect or an engineer or a planner. 5 change of zones have been processed under this amendment. Not one planner has given a report. They're all given by architects and engineers. Architects and engineers, one, don't have the complete knowledge of regional planning, which is very important if you want to criticize the regional plan, right? You need to know what regional plan is. They may know a little bit about urban planning and about design of settlements, but regional planning has a lot of modeling and statistics that's needed, which architects and engineers honestly just don't know. And these same architects and engineers are hired by the builder then to design their projects. So it's very often, give me this certificate and then I'll give you the work once my zoning gets changed. But it's also the speed at which these are getting cleared, and we've still not got the data. I see Anthony on the call over here who's helping us with RTIs, but the government is fast tracking these zone changes. We've been 45 days, we've not got one technical report till now. So they're deliberately hiding what the engineers and architects are even telling them is wrong with the regional plan from people like us who are trying to look at. But I'm going to give you all a very visible case study of how 17.2 has been used to legitimize illegal activities. On 20th April, 62,000 square meters belonging to one Ganga Reddy infrastructure and the actor Ram Charan were converted from orchard land to settlement land. This is the regional plan for Morji. What I've done is I've clearly marked out what is the settlement ribbon, right? So now let's say maybe this plot of agriculture, which is completely engrossed by settlement. If you say maybe there was an error or maybe it's in public interest to zone change me, that's reasonable. Research may prove a case for it. But the land belonging to Ganga Reddy is way up here on the plateau. If you see, there's not even a road accessing it. These dotted lines are roads. So once again, looking at the settlement, and these are the Gazette extracts. You can see that there is a very steep slope that surrounds these land. But as of 20th April, the application was received, processed in 20 days. And now this is how Morji is. And if you see, they made a correction to regional plan and showed a road. And, I can't see this, but basically what people of Morji have already documented in a lot of detail is that this road was built in 2021. In April of 2022, last year, they had already done the thing on this orchard land where nothing was allowed. The minister came and did an inspection after taking power, saying, I will take action against illegal development in a no development land. But now what has happened? Now that no development land has become developable. So all the promises of taking action have been thrown out the window. And this is what we fear the amendments are going to do, right? Because somebody's already done something wrong. Instead of taking action by law, they are finding ways to create loopholes so that people who have violated the law can now get legitimized in their action. And the truth is that they're all major firms like Ganga Reddy Infrastructure. If you see all of them, of the first four that have come out, one is by some Nadar builders. The second one is by Ganga Reddy in Morji. Third is by one Jai Trimurti Construction. And I'm yet to find out what the fourth is. All four of these mistakes also are all in Tiswadi and Bhartes and Salset, where there is solid development pressure. So the poor Goan is at least does not have the privilege to intervene in this corrections clause. Who is intervening in this corrections clause are people with vested interests.
Right, that's quite something. And that's true. That really leaves us, I mean, the poor Goans pretty much be helpless, and our land is just being given away, and clearly there's a lobby for this by the bigger players. And the rest helpless. So just going forward, actually, before we go ahead, maybe it would be great to answer a few questions that are already put into the chat here. Tahir, please go ahead and address.
Yeah, so I see somebody asked, where do heritage listings and regulations fit in, and can we legally compel the government to frame DC rules? I like that question. Yes, heritage, protection of environment are part of DCR, not building bylaws. And now that's a policy decision. In Goa, I think you have a strong case to compel them, because in Goa we have made a policy decision in Panjim and Margao to mark so-called conservation areas where it makes a lot of sense then to have additional regulations within for those conservation areas. Right now, what they're doing in conservation areas is if there's a conservation area, there is a conservation committee who decides construction on a case-to-case basis. Once again, our government seems to love this case-to-case basis instead of having a set of guidelines for construction in the conservation area. So yes, I think there's a strong case to legally compel the government to draft these laws because committees are temporary and they're prone to so many errors. At the end of the day, another question that I see here is, does the Minister of Panchayat or the Director of Panchayat fit in as members of the subcommittee? What expertise do both of them bring in? So urban development and Panchayat, I think, do have a place on the steering committee for the single reason of the 73rd and 74th Amendment. They are supposed to be representing the elected local bodies. In Goa, they don't. Honestly, that's my view. But I think that's the only reason why they are on the committees. Because why? Or maybe to connect with, to give views coming from the central government's panchayat schemes and urban development schemes. Because sometimes the central government has schemes like smart city or the nation's EV policy, which may have connotations on local government and on planning. So maybe they're here for that reason, for funding and investment that comes in. Maybe they're here for the 73rd and 74th Amendment reason, but it doesn't look like they contribute much to discussion, these two departments.
Thanks for addressing. Please, Tahir. Sorry,
I found a video of what's happening in Mochi. Let me show you that.
Sure.
In the meantime, since we have stuff. Slideshow. Yep. So in May of 2022, you can see how the land has been cut, already filled. There is a road. But what else is? This is a little drone video showing you the entire property. This is 1 year before they got permission. They got permission in April this year, by the way. And this is what, at the beginning of the road, this is what you see. This road is a private property. So now they've marked a private road in the regional plan through a correction, the first case that this has ever happened. And this is an advertisement for the development posted in December. My point being for what's happened in Mochi and what's going to happen across Goa is that in December, nobody had an idea that this amendment or Town Planning Act would even come. But they could have never, under the current zoning, have developed the orchard land this way. Yet they were advertising it. So is there a nexus between the legislators and the builders? Yes, there has to be. And this is what happened last year. I want people to remember this because this is part of the problem. Order has been issued to take action against illegal hill cutting. Now the hill cutting is not illegal anymore. And we always have to think now, next time we vote, who the government is really serving. It makes me very, very irritated, but this is the truth of the matter.
That's true. And this may be the first case, but feels like it's almost paving the way for such properties to come up. This is pretty insane. Anyhow, from before school, I've learned that upon studying the amendments, you prepare a list of those who have requested these amendments, and that the sources of these are rather puzzling and unclear. So can you tell us in brief about these sources and what about them is perplexing exactly?
So, to me, two of the amendments that perplex me the most come from our former town planning minister, Kavlikar, who said, people came to me with complaints that their existing structures cannot be legitimized, and we need to relax the regularization clause. The other concerning amendment comes from our chief minister, who says we need more space for housing for migrant workers, and I recommend that the industrial estates be used to accommodate those spaces. Both of these are from the chief minister and the deputy chief minister. They bring with them the entire mechanism of the state to do studies to back up these claims. But both of these two amendments have been asked for from the perspective that we are elected representatives, where we've got these questions from the general public of Goa. I mean, there is a real lethargy in the department, right? I mean, you are the chief minister or the deputy chief minister. You have several departments ready to work for you. You have chief minister's fellows ready to work for you. Why couldn't simple studies be done looking and giving strong, compelling reasons for these amendments? These aren't normal people or the public who have to do studies and justify. These are the state. But the state thinks that it can just push things through, giving the argument of participation and democracy. We have been elected by the people. We represent people's best interests. But it doesn't matter who you are, especially if you come from the state, you need to give reasons for what you want to do because you have the privilege. What's happening with the amendments is that the state just puts them out. And then we, the people who have our own lives to go about, have to stop everything and go and find reasons for them. It's really quite pathetic and irritating to me because I feel that the state needs to be the custodian of these things.
That's true. I mean, I hope this doesn't discourage our viewers to still please go ahead and do everything you can in your power. But so I'd like to tie in our last question along with Nandini's from the chat. One, going forward, what are the next steps to counter these amendments, and how can the public at large be involved in that? And what are the departments, websites, the other spaces that one can keep a track of these amendments? And how can one know, just a layperson, know that such changes are happening?
Okay, nice questions. First of all, what we've done is we've drafted a objection letter, which is up on the Act for Goa website. You can download that letter, edit it. Maybe you think that the industrial policy is a good one. Delete that. You may think the electric vehicle policy is a good one. Delete that. But at least regarding the farmhouses, the allowing construction on agricultural zones, the regulation of illegal construction, I think we're all on the same page about those. But you feel free to tweak our draft letter from the Act for Goa website and sign it. Try to get your friends and colleagues to sign it as well. And if you can submit it either to any of our collection centers. We have one in Porvory at Dean de Cruz's office. We have one in Markau at the Goenche Futle Pilge Khatir's office. We have, or you can just give it in TCP, or you can email a scanned version to Act for Goa, and we'll make sure that it gets delivered. One of the biggest assets we have is in September, we got 1,500 objection letters, and the government freaked out and backed out. One of the reasons why they backed out, as somebody on the subcommittee told me, is that who's going to read 1,500 letters, right? I mean, especially each one's making different points. So if you can take time to tweak some of the statements to fit your own viewpoint, that becomes very powerful, because they have to give a reply to every objection letter. And the subcommittee, then the job goes back on the government and their appointees in the subcommittee, who have to find reasons to, despite all of the concerns we have raised, they have to now do the research. Finally, they have to do the research and make a case for why these amendments are good. And if these amendments go through, GBA, Goa Bachao Abhiyan, is planning to challenge them in court. But we need to hear both sides before that. So I'm really reaching out to everybody to take a spin on our draft letter, put in your own viewpoints, submit it. Let's now give the government a little bit of work. Let the subcommittee do their studies, and then we'll see how to best challenge it. But we have a very strong case already against some of these amendments because they're unprecedented. First of all, the GLDBCR is unprecedented. And now amending planning provisions under the guise of building amendments is also unprecedented. So let's focus on these 11 amendments first, because they're open for public comment. And let's just hit them with our views. I see someone has asked, how can Goans out of Goa participate in this? If you are a Goan and you love Goa, please feel free to sign it. Get your friends, other Goans who are outside Goa to sign it too. Take a scan and email it to Act for Goa. I'll put their email address in the chat. We'll submit it for you. Just make sure that you have a Goa address, because if you're not a voter or a resident of Goa, you can't be seen to work it. Yes, the last date is extended to Friday, the 2nd of June. We filed an application on the 26th because you know what they had done very interestingly. In the initial draft amendments, the farmhouse size was capped at 500 square meters. And then 1 week later, on the 5th of May, they issued a correctdenum, a correction to the notification saying, we typed 500 by mistake, we meant 1000. That itself was so shady. So shady. So on the 26th, we put an application in saying, because you tweaked such a major provision of the amendments, you have to give us till the 5th of June. But then they replied to our application saying the 5th of June is 31 days and 30 days. So the closest Friday, which is the 2nd of June, is the last day.
Thanks, Tahir. But yes, personally from Act for Goa as well, I urge everyone to go ahead and sign these objection letters. We should be so grateful that such active citizens, Tahir included, have gone through the effort of drafting these letters and making our lives a lot simpler. But of course, as Tahir said, go through it, see if it aligns with your vision, and please do put in your own objections and suggestions as well. I have dropped in an email ID on the chat. And for any further information or for a link to the letter, I suggest everybody email in to info@actforgoa.org, and we will provide you with whatever information needed. And yes, the previous date for when we could actually submit our objection letters was set as the 26th of May. But thanks to the application, it's been extended by another week, and going forward, we have only another 4 days. So what you can do is you can actually print out the objection letter. You can sign it and then just take a picture and email it to us. You wouldn't have to step out anywhere for that matter. You can just send it ahead to us and we will take care of it. But yes, so we've reached the end of our session, and I thank you all for having joined us today, and hope that Tahir's answers have been incredibly insightful and have garnered the need within you to take action and ultimately help to go a sustainable development. So it really is important for such threatening laws to be done with. And when us citizens do in fact have a chance to be heard and participate in planning in such a way, we really ought to do everything in our capacity to find and engage to protect our state and protect it for our future generations. So again, thanks to experts in Goa. They made our life so much simpler by drafting these letters and these such toolkits, which merely requires signature. So I urge you all to please go ahead. For those who may have missed out on the talk, this interview session will be available on Unchained Mauler's and Act for Goa social media platforms. So, and going forward, Unchained Mauler has a bunch of interesting sessions on the social handles that highlight various environmental issues in Goa. So I suggest you stay updated on that. And thank you all for joining, and thank you, Tahir, for this insightful conversation.
Thanks, Trella, for being an excellent host and putting these smart questions to me.